Hey, I'm going to be speaking about a controversial topic, so I just ask that you will listen to the series of these videos before clicking off of it or forming an opinion. My heart is that you would be able to listen to the message behind it and take it into prayer as well. In the Christian community, I've heard a lot of divide between whether or not a Christian should be able to partake into yoga. And so I've heard people say, oh, yoga is demonic. And people have shared that and they're like, oh, yoga is not demonic. It's just stretching. These Christians don't have an open mind or whatever it is. I just want to talk about this topic. I want to be able to present some information to you as well. And so when I've heard people say that it's just stretching, and so I am a big definition person, and I think it's really important for us to really clearly define things. So I looked up the definition of just stretching in general, right? Stretching is what we know it as. It's defined as straightening or extending one's body or a part of one's body to its full length, typically to tighten one's muscle. So we know that people stretch after exercising because we have sore muscles. It's good for us. It's good for us to have regular stretching. So because I looked up that definition, I thought it was only appropriate to actually look up the definition of yoga. Yoga, defined by Google, says it is a Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline, a part of which includes breathing control, simple meditation, and the adoption of specific bodily postures, which is widely practiced for health and relaxation. I think first that it's important that the definition of yoga doesn't say that it is a stretching, a series of stretches, right? It begins saying that it is a Hindu spiritual act that involves breathing, meditation, and stretching. So what about those who are yoga instructors here in America? I know that probably majority of people who are here in America who are yoga instructors do not subscribe to say that I am practicing in this Hindu practice. I'm just doing yoga because it's something I like to do. I like to stretch. It's something that has calmed me. It's something that is good for my body as far as like flexibility. Well, I want to answer that. I think it would be good to be able to provide maybe a parallel example concerning maybe yoga and stretching in itself to something else. For instance, we hear about the month where Muslims celebrate Ramadan. And so in this month, they particularly dedicate to Allah, their God, who they believe is the true God. They dedicate a month of fasting specifically for the purpose of their spiritual journey. So fasting in itself, just like stretching in itself, does not subscribe to anything, right? So because we know that Christians also fast. So being involved in fasting as a Christian, even in the month of Ramadan, does not mean that we are doing that in honor of Allah, right? We do that as a Christian to grow closer to Jesus. So what separates the two? What separates fasting in itself to partaking in Ramadan fasting to Allah, or stretching in itself to partaking in stretching in yoga class? The difference is that when those Muslims are practicing this, often they are going to a mosque, right? This is their temple. This is their place of worship. In their place of worship, obviously, whoever goes into this place has to come to realize this is an organized, central, I would say, event or place of worship. This is a place that is going to be honoring someone else, right? Allah. If you were to go and practice fasting or whatever it is, even prayer, right, in different capacities, they mean different things. So if you were to go to a Christian worship service, you are worshiping, fasting, and praying unto Jesus. Even if in your mind you're saying, I don't believe in him, you are underneath the organized gathering belt of this class, this worship, this setting. So you cannot be a Christian and say, I'm fasting to Jesus, but do everything as Muslims do, going to their mosque, going and doing what they're doing underneath their organized structure of what they call as Ramadan. Is this making sense to you? So yoga, you can't take the spiritual aspect, the spiritual origination of it outside of yoga itself. Even if you do not say, we are Hindu, we're going to do this, we're going to wear all the different things, You can't take that out because you are doing that underneath the organization of the name of yoga. Now, if you were calling it stretching class, hey, as I was editing the video, I want to interject that I'm not saying if you have a yoga class, just call it stretching instead. I address this a little bit later in the video, so I just wanted to clarify that just in case, so keep on listening. And you end up being in some of those positions. I say some because I think there are very particular positions whenever it comes to yoga, and they call it specific names. Of course, they call it specific names because those are made as a form of worship to their deities. I can imagine I may get misrepresented with the things I'm saying and get mockers on my comments, and that's fine. That's okay. This message is going to be for whoever wants to receive it, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is I'm not saying that if you're a yoga instructor that just change your name to stretching and it'll be okay. Because really, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that sometimes exercise is good for our body. When we exercise and our muscles are sore and we're stretching it out, maybe we may be in one of those positions. But we are not intentionally underneath an organization of a setting or class that is specifically geared towards that of open meditation, or think something that is underneath the belt of what has Hindu origins that you just cannot get away from, even if you're an American doing that here and not really specifying, hey, this is a Hindu class, this is a Hindu practice. There are very specific poses, even like, when people play around and they're like, oh, I'm going to meditate, and they'll crisscross applesauce, and they put their hands like this. Even that gesture in itself has a very spiritual meaning when you're doing that, right? Because you always associate that with someone in meditation or someone partaking in yoga, because it is a part of that practice. The hands in itself, even like in representation of the faith of Christian faith, the right hand had very symbolic meaning when God says that I will uphold you with my right hand. All other religions also have their own meaning of something. So with the hand, they believe that you can obtain particular insight and knowledge too. So this means something like you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining something. And that is, where do you think that energy is coming from, right? Like you can say, oh, the energy is just from myself, from within. Well, we are not gods in ourselves. We did not create the energy, right? We know in ourselves that God is the creator of everything. Energy, time, space, matter. God created it all. And that's what we believe as Christians. And I've made videos about this before. We cannot just separate the fact that there is a spiritual realm that we are not fully aware of. So when we partake in certain things, like I'm just going to do this, I'm going to say, that humming is also something in dedication to a Hindu god as well. There's a reason why when you see someone sitting down and they're doing this and they're humming and umming, there is a reason why we know and associate that's yoga. Oh, they're meditating. We know that because we know that that is the belt of that organized sense. Just the same thing with the cross. People should know, and I think most of people know and would associate the cross with Jesus, right? Because that is very symbolic to our faith. That is the premise of our faith, of Jesus dying on the cross and rising again for his death and burial, resurrection. That is very pertinent to our faith. So listen, is it wise for a Christian to go to yoga class? No, because there is something spiritual about it. No matter how much you try to remove the spiritual aspect of it, there is still something spiritual about it. So I believe that we need to be intentional about breathing, slowing down, stretching at times, praying, specifically praying to Jesus, meditating, not mindless meditation, but meditating on the Word of God. Absolutely, those things are beneficial. But underneath the belt and organization of a class called yoga, you cannot separate any type of spiritual aspect of that. No matter if you call it cat yoga, goat yoga, park yoga, whatever it is, kind of yoga, it is still yoga. Even if you think it's nonsense, you're like, I don't see anything wrong with it. I do it all the time. If God can talk to me if he thinks there's something wrong. My prayer is that you are willing to just take it to him. Lord, would you just show me and give me a heavenly perspective about this? I'm gonna pause from going to yoga class, and I want you to give me a revelation about it. I want to seek you in this and be willing to seek him in it, not just write it off like, okay, she's just being extra, because I believe that most people, if they enjoy it, they've liked it, and they may not understand it, but they're not willing to go and surrender it. So that is my heart and my prayer for you, Christian.